Here's how the president-elect just addressed the president he is replacing, as Donald Trump's avoided speaking since this weekend and has not conceded.
I just think it's an embarrassment, quite frankly. The only thing that, how can I say this tactfully? I think it will not help the president's legacy.
A respectful and restrained tone there from the president-elect. Today marks the first time President-elect Biden took questions from reporters. He discussed the transition, health care, COVID. And we also know world leaders like Angela Merkel, Boris Johnson, and Emmanuel Macron have been doing what the current president appears unable to do, process the election results and plan for the Biden administration. There is still only one president at a time in this country, and President Trump is using his current lawful authority to take what are basically relatively minor steps and sometimes what appear to be petty actions like this one in protest of this inevitability of his replacement. The White House also delaying the daily intelligence briefing that typically go to a president-elect, delaying some transition paperwork. Now, let me tell you tonight, because we follow the facts here, this is not the makings of a constitutional crisis. This is really more like poor sportsmanship. The game is over, and one team won't shake hands or face its own loss. Now, it is also certainly not ideal, because these petty moves could hinder governing. And we also know that even during actually contested election results, past White Houses were meticulous about their transitions. The Clinton administration providing those same intelligence briefings I mentioned to Bush during the 2000 recount when he was not president-elect as Biden is now. They did it in an abundance of fairness.
Even so, the Bush team will now receive more cooperation from the Clinton administration for a transition. White House Chief of Staff John Podesta tells Bush advisor Andrew Card the Texas governor's team will, by next week, start receiving daily intelligence briefings. Podesta and Card also discussed starting FBI background checks for Bush appointees.
So that's some of what's going on. It is certainly news in the federal government, and I've brought it to you. But now tonight, can we also just be real for a second? Donald Trump's actions tell the real story here. If Donald Trump really thought he won, would he be quiet for now 5 days in running? If Donald Trump really thought there was some sort of actual chance for him to get to a second term, would he be sitting around right now like a bystander, privately, off the record, trying to get his family members and Republican allies to go out in public and find some reason they could explain and say why he would stay in office after being the loser of the race, when he can't come up with that himself? In many ways, this is a fundamentally obscure and minor exercise. And the closer you are to politics, the more obvious it is, because we track these kind of moves, like the president literally creating a venue for his ex-presidency plans, this new political action committee that will fund those future projects when he's out of the White House. Or the president telling Mike Pence he can go on vacation in Florida through this weekend, which is not exactly battle mode for a second term that no longer exists. Kicking off our special coverage tonight, we have Professor Jason Johnson, an MSNBC analyst, and Michael Cohen, who was, of course, President Trump's former lawyer. He's the author of the book Disloyal, a memoir, the true story of the former personal attorney to President Donald J. Trump. Good evening to both of you. Michael, we want to be as clear, factual, and fair as always. And so part of what's happening here looks, as I've told viewers, relatively minor, although not ideal. Much of it is a bit of a quiet kind of backing down from what Donald Trump had implied or threatened he might do in this instance. Your view?
So Donald Trump is acting like a crybaby. He's like a child that just got kicked out of the candy store, and he wants what's inside, but you can't have it. There was a fair election. The election is over. Now, let me just give you a little bit. And if you read the book, you'll see that there are stories that aren't that dissimilar to what he's doing now. Because he lost, he feels like a loser. And that's the worst thing that Donald Trump can feel. So what he'd rather do is burn the house down than to hand over the keys to the house when it's taken over. And that's because he's fundamentally flawed as a human being. He doesn't have honor. You know, if you watch to see the way Clinton and Bush behave, it's because they have honor. if you look to see even the way Joe Biden is behaving right now as it relates to Trump and this childish behavior of his, there's an honor there. Donald Trump doesn't have honor, and that's the problem.
Jason?
Yeah, I mean, what you have here is all these attempts to slow an inevitable process. And this is kind of what Joe Biden was talking about earlier today. He's like, look, once these states sort of ratify in December and we get the electors, and the Supreme Court has already said that faithful electors isn't really a thing, this job becomes Joe Biden's job on January 20th. There is nothing that Donald Trump can do. He can try and slow paperwork here and there. He can try and make this whole White House transition like going to the DMV on a Saturday morning. But at the end of the day, some of these processes just turn over. At some point, your key card in the office isn't going to work anymore. And so I think what is bothersome to a lot of people with good reason is when you have officials like Mike Pompeo saying, well, we're going to get a second transition. And when you have Mitch McConnell saying these things, I think they're just bloviating in order to make Trump feel better, because from a legal standpoint and a practical standpoint, unless they have some intergalactic plan to change electors across 6 different states, this job is going to be Joe Biden's in 70 days, and there's nothing Trump can do about it.
Yeah, Michael, this part of this is what is a decreasingly relevant story, but in those 70 days, he is the president. And you mentioned contrasting him to other people in both parties, by the way, and how they deal with this. And that came up when we had Robert De Niro on last night, who's famously clashed with the president. Take a look at this brief exchange. What do we take from all the tough guys you've played and thinking about how this is a country, a culture that celebrates toughness, but sometimes gets carried away with it, if you think about mafia movies?
I'd like to even think in some of those, in all of those parts, there's a certain dignity somewhere buried in there that I don't think a person like Trump, I know, doesn't have. There's no center.
Michael, do you agree with Robert De Niro on that assessment?
I wouldn't be crazy enough to argue with the raging bull. I mean, he is Robert De Niro, and he's the guy is spot on. You know, the guy is 100% spot on. You know, here's the biggest problem as it relates to Trump, and everybody has to take a chill pill on this one, because Donald Trump talks a lot of nonsense. You may remember going back to the whole birtherism. Oh, I'm sending, you know, I have my investigators there in Hawaii. We found out, look what we found out. It's all a lie. 99.9% of everything that comes out of his mouth is a lie. He's not going to stay in the White House past January 20th. They will remove him. He knows that. He also, in my opinion, is not after Christmas. He usually comes back January 5th, January 6th. He likes to go to Mar-a-Lago. I suspect he doesn't even come back to Washington. I don't believe he's going to go to the inauguration, because he himself fundamentally cannot sit in a chair knowing that the cameras are on him and that the world is looking at him as a loser. He cannot do that. He does not have enough inner strength in him in order to be gracious. You know, in defeat comes honor. It's the way that you lose. You know, in chess, you put your king down when you know that you're going to lose, right? Not Trump. In the olden days, they would turn over their swords or their rifles, right, during the wars in order to give up. Not Trump. He will pretend to fight because he has a game plan post the fight. As you said, it's the PAC. It's a Trump media company. He is going to be a thorn in Joe Biden's side unless President-elect Biden puts a stop to it right here and right now. Unless he does such a thing, Donald Trump is going to be a thorn in his side 10 times worse with his 70, 80, 90, 100 million followers, right? By building up this social media company, because this is what he needs to do. He needs to keep his base rallied around him. He's going to say for the next 30 years that they stole the election from me. I'm the rightful president. He's going to keep his MAGA army active and engaged, going to constantly blow this dog whistle, and he's going to be a menace. And watch what. So far, everything that I said 19, 20 months ago, I said before the House Oversight Committee, there will never be a peaceful transition of power. And why was I able to predict that? Because I know the man. And I hope he's watching, because I would say to him, Donald, leave with grace, leave with honor and dignity. But he won't do that because he's incapable. He's just fundamentally incapable. It's not his core.
Yeah, I mean, you lay it all out there, and this is important for the factual record. Donald Trump today is still sending out many emails and texts to supporters. As we've been discussing, they're requesting money that they say are for lawsuits, but the money isn't going there. You need to know this. The fine print reveals 60% of these newly requested donations are for Save America, which is the new PAC that will fund, under the law, these things are regulated, the ex-presidency activities. The other 40% goes right to the RNC after a donor gives over $5,000. Only then does any of the money go to what is called the recount account. In other words, Jason Trump...
Ari, the reason...
Go ahead.
Ari, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but the reason he's doing it, and sorry, Jay, the reason he's doing it is because he has no income. And you would see that if he would turn over his tax returns. There's no income there, right? So he doesn't have the apprentice making $65 million a year. Most of his assets are underperforming. They're non-performing assets. The few that he has doesn't cover the big cost. So he's going to use this like he used the Trump Foundation as a slush fund. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I think that was a very factual interruption. I'll let Jason build on the same point, which is we've never been a show that's overreacted to just Trump tweets or anything else. We will continue to keep our eye on the news and events as they occur. As I've emphasized, he is still the sitting president. If he is misleading or lying about the nature of this appeals process, we need to put that out so people understand, including his own supporters, Jason, who, if they watch the beat tonight, will say, oh, wow, so wait, the email subject line said we're out to fight these cases, but the money doesn't even go to that.
Right. And we've seen this with Trump world in general, Ari. We saw it with the wall. People thought they were giving to a wall. They were giving to slush funds. And here's the thing. Not just that Trump has no income, but he is also potentially facing dozens of lawsuits once he is no longer president of the United States. So to continue, mentioned yesterday dinner, continue with that De Niro theme from Heat. Like when the heat is coming, can't have anything in your life, you can't leave in 30 seconds. Trump can't leave politics because at this point, it's his only way of making money. He will perpetually claim that he is running for president. He will open up super PACs. He will do rallies because that's the only way for him to make cash. He will be defending himself legally the moment he gets out of office. And this is what I think, quite frankly, the president should probably want to avoid from a branding perspective. Look, I don't necessarily think he's going to end up in jail. But if he continues to play this game, and eventually, you know, the press is not going to care. The public's not going to care. Republicans are going to start moving along with what they need to do. What he doesn't want is an embarrassing situation of him or someone linked to him having to be removed. He doesn't want the image of somebody coming up to the White House and their key doesn't work. And that's what he's facing if he continues in this mode.
I got to get this in. We went from Cohen to De Niro to Pacino to Johnson. It wouldn't be complete without Rosie, who's also clashed with the president long before he was president. But I did catch up with her today. This was just on Instagram Live spontaneously. Rosie O'Donnell, and he's badmouthed her in some of the most sexist ways, likening him now in this moment to a caged animal. Take a look.
I think he's in shock, and he doesn't quite know what to do. And he sees no way out, and now he's panicking like a caged animal and trying to, fabricate causes for his trumped up charges against this election and fraud. He's a desperate man, and he's in a desperate situation, and it brings joy to millions of us.
Michael, your view of her assessment of him is that desperate?
So first of all, I've grown now to become friends with Rosie. She came to visit me while I was in Otisville. And we became pen. We speak on a regular basis, and I apologized to her each and every time. She told me I have to stop because I was part of that attack upon her, which was really obscene and it was gross.
I'm going to now interrupt
I did it again,
you.
I don't know, but
Michael, I'm going to interrupt you. So it goes back and forth. That's the thing with lawyers on TV together. But this is interesting. I mean, you're saying that when you were behind the walls there in prison, dealing with much of what you had to deal with because of your work for Donald Trump, that Rosie O'Donnell came and visited you and you guys bonded over all this?
She did. She spent over 6 hours with me one day. She was a hit in the rec room. Don't forget, I was in a satellite camp. Everybody loves Rosie, and everybody came over, and she was just as gracious can be. But Jason, I do have to disagree with you on something. I believe Trump does go to jail. And if it's not Trump, he'll push one of the kids, probably Don Jr. before Ivanka,
Oh, yes.
definitively Eric before Ivanka. But Ivanka will go to prison before Donald because that's just who he is. All right. There's enough actions. Look, I'm suing Donald Trump right now in the Trump organization. There's a plethora of litigation that's going to come. So all of the people who probably aren't watching the show, the Republicans and the followers of Donald Trump, go ahead, give him your money so that he now has a slush fund to use your money in order to pay for his dirty deeds. I mean, I just don't understand what people are thinking.
Well, I hear you on that, and we love having everyone watch our show, including Republicans. We saw the numbers that more people watched the show last night than Fox News last night. So I think we got plenty of people. And Michael, you're here to address everyone, including as the nation heals. I say this in all seriousness. What does the nation want to do in this dialogue? Something's happened. It's not over. But if you are a person who once believed in Donald Trump, as Michael Cohen did, what do we want to do in a factual environment? Because it doesn't all have to be partisan war forever. Michael and Jason, thank you for kicking us off tonight. We have our shortest break, just 30 seconds. When we come back, Mitch McConnell caught in a bind. My breakdown of a new memo from the Justice Department from Bill Barr, what it means. I'm going to show that all to you and some positive signs that we actually saw